It wasn't announced from Buckingham Palace. There were no trumpets, no official ceremony, no smiling royal portrait. Instead, the decision came through a private approval quietly signed by King Charles I that insiders claim could permanently reshape Prince George's future. Behind closed palace doors, preparations had already begun. And according to whispers circulating among royal aides, even Prince William appeared stunned by how quickly the order moved forward. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. At first, the palace attempted to present the entire situation as nothing more than a routine adjustment. Royal schedules change constantly. Security procedures evolve. International tours are often reorganized quietly behind the scenes. But according to several media insiders familiar with the internal discussions surrounding Kensington Palace, this was something entirely different. Reports began surfacing that King Charles had personally approved a new set of international travel arrangements specifically concerning Prince George, the second in line to the throne and the young royal many now born. I believe is being prepared for responsibilities far earlier than anyone expected. What made the situation even more startling was the speed at which the approval allegedly moved through palace channels. Sources whisper that senior aides were given instructions with unusual urgency, while protection officers assigned to royal travel were reportedly called into a string of private meetings that stretched late into the evening. And then came the detail that truly ignited speculation inside royal circles. Palace insiders described the changes as highly unusual for a future king. That phrase alone was enough to send commentators, historians, and royal correspondents scrambling for answers. Because for generations, royal travel rules surrounding heirs to the throne had been among the strictest protocols within the monarchy. Every route, every aircraft, every destination is weighed against centuries of constitutional caution. The monarchy does not gamble with succession. It never has. Which is precisely why the sudden adjustments surrounding George immediately triggered questions no one inside the palace seemed eager to answer publicly. According to reports emerging from royal administration, Tive staff, Prince William and Princess Catherine had allegedly participated in several private meetings in the weeks leading up to the approval. Different interpretations of those meetings describe an atmosphere that was far more tense than the palace wanted the public to believe. Some insiders claim William initially resisted parts of the proposal, concerned about the growing pressure being placed upon his eldest son. Others suggest Catherine's focus remained fixed on protecting George from the emotional burden that comes with becoming the symbolic future of the crown while still so young. Yet despite those concerns, the discussions reportedly continued behind closed doors with increasing intensity. Meanwhile, royal protection officers were allegedly seen revising long-standing travel procedures connected to George's movements abroad. Security teams attached to royal operations are said to have received updated instructions regarding aircraft arrangements, international coordination, and emergency response contingencies. Those familiar with royal protocol understand how significant that truly is. These systems are not casually altered. They are rooted in decades of constitutional planning designed to protect the monarchy against instability, tragedy, or crisis. Which is why the timing of this sudden shift has become impossible to ignore, because beneath all the official silence lies a far more unsettling possibility. Reports suggest the changes are directly connected to Prince George's increasing constitutional importance during a period of growing uncertainty surrounding the future of the monarchy itself. Since early 2024, King Charles' health struggles have forced senior royals to confront difficult realities behind palace walls. And according to whispers circulating among royal commentators, those realities may now be accelerating plans that were originally intended for years down the line. The media speculation only intensified as palace watchers began piecing together subtle details from recent public appearances. George appeared more carefully positioned during major royal events. His movements seemed more controlled. His visibility within key ceremonial moments noticeably increased. Royal historians quietly pointed out that the palace may already be shaping public perception of the young prince as a stabilizing symbol for the monarchy's next generation. But the real shock came when insiders revealed this wasn't only about travel, it was about preparing George for responsibilities far sooner than expected. For decades, royal heirs followed rigid travel traditions designed to protect the monarchy from disaster. Yet suddenly, those ancient rules appeared to bend for Prince George. Why would King Charles risk altering protocols that survived wars, abdications, and generations of royal succession? According to palace whispers, the answer may lie in fears quietly growing behind the walls of Buckingham Palace since early 2024. To understand why this decision has shaken royal observers so deeply, it is necessary to understand just how sacred these protocols truly are within the monarchy. The rules surrounding royal heirs were never created for comfort or convenience. They were born from fear of losing the bloodline, fear of constitutional instability, fear of the chaos that could erupt if tragedy struck too many direct heirs at once. For generations, senior royals followed carefully constructed travel restrictions specifically designed to protect the continuity of the crown. The monarchy survives through order, planning, and conservation, and nowhere was that principle enforced more strictly than in the movements of future kings. When King Charles was a child, reports suggest palace advisors closely monitored every journey involving him and Queen Elizabeth II. As the direct heir, Charles was often separated from senior members of the family during official tours to minimize constitutional risk. Similar caution reportedly followed Prince William throughout his youth. Royal historians frequently point to the years after Princess Diana's death, when palace officials became even more protective of William's position in the line of succession. By the time he entered adulthood, long-standing procedures allegedly discouraged William and Prince George from traveling together. Under certain circumstances, once George became old enough to assume constitutional significance himself. Those traditions were never symbolic. They were treated as matters of national continuity, which is why insiders were reportedly stunned when discussions began emerging about revised arrangements surrounding George's international movements. According to whispers from palace administrative circles, certain restrictions that once seemed untouchable were suddenly being reconsidered at the highest levels of royal authority. And at the center of those discussions stood King Charles himself. Reports suggest the monarch's ongoing health struggles may have dramatically accelerated internal conversations surrounding succession planning. Since early 2024, the palace has attempted to project stability to the public, carefully managing appearances and messaging around the king's condition. But behind that controlled image, royal insiders claim a far more urgent reality has been unfolding quietly within palace walls. Because for the first time in decades, the monarchy is confronting the uncomfortable possibility that multiple generations of succession may need to be prepared simultaneously. Different interpretations from royal commentators suggest Charles has become increasingly focused on securing long-term continuity while he still can. Some insiders even claim the king views Prince George not simply as a future heir, but as what one palace source allegedly described as the monarchy's future anchor. That phrase alone reveals the growing weight now surrounding the young prince. George is no longer being viewed merely as William and Catherine's eldest child. He is being positioned, carefully and quietly, as the stabilizing symbol of a future royal era that may arrive sooner than anyone once imagined. As these concerns intensified, reports suggest palace security teams began expanding preparations connected to George's future international role. Protection officers were allegedly tasked with reviewing overseas contingency plans, diplomatic coordination structures, and revised travel logistics involving the young prince. Sources familiar with royal operations claim discussions even extended beyond immediate security. Concerns and into broader questions about George's long-term public positioning on the world stage. That shift is significant because royal travel has never only been about movement. It is about symbolism, presence, continuity. Every appearance by an heir quietly signals stability to both Britain and the Commonwealth. And according to palace whispers, the institution may already be preparing George to carry far more of that burden than the public realizes. Royal historians increasingly describe the monarchy as entering what they call a transition era, not an official transition of power, not publicly, but an emotional and constitutional transition unfolding beneath the surface. The late Queen Elizabeth II represented permanence for over 70 years. Charles inherited a crown already facing modern uncertainty. William represents the future. But George, according to growing speculation, represents survival beyond that future. And while the public saw only routine family appearances, insiders claim George himself had already begun preparing for a dramatically different royal life. Those closest to the Wales family reportedly noticed the change months ago. Prince George, the once shy boy standing beside Queen Elizabeth's coffin, was suddenly being treated less like a child and more like a future sovereign in training. Behind palace gates, quiet lessons, private briefings, and carefully controlled appearances were allegedly shaping a royal transformation few were meant to notice. At first, the changes were subtle enough to escape public attention. A slightly more composed posture during official appearances. Longer conversations with senior palace advisors after ceremonies ended. Carefully timed introductions to diplomats, military figures, and constitutional experts. MIRTs who normally would have remained distant from a child his age. But according to insiders familiar with the private rhythms of royal life, something far more deliberate had begun unfolding around Prince George. Reports suggest the young heir was quietly entering a new phase of preparation, one designed not merely to educate him about monarchy, but to slowly immerse him in the immense psychological weight carried by those born closest to the crown. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim George's constitutional education has increased significantly over recent months. Unlike traditional schooling, these lessons reportedly go far beyond history books or formal protocol. They are said to focus on understanding the invisible machinery of monarchy itself, the relationship between crown and government, the meaning of public duty, and the centuries-old expectation that personal emotion must often yield to national responsibility. Palace aides allegedly believe George is now old enough to begin understanding the seriousness of his future position. And according to whispers circulating among royal staff, those lessons have become more frequent since King Charles' health struggles intensify. Amid public concerns surrounding the monarchy's long-term stability. But perhaps even more revealing were the reports surrounding George's private mentoring sessions. Different interpretations from palace insiders suggest these meetings intensified quietly behind the scenes, involving trusted royal advisors and senior figures with deep institutional experience. The goal, according to one royal commentator, was not to overwhelm George, but to gradually prepare him for the emotional isolation that often comes with royal destiny. Because within the monarchy, heirs are not simply raised, they are shaped, carefully, slowly, sometimes painfully. And those closest to the process allegedly began noticing a profound change in George himself. Prince William, according to several palace sources, has become deeply involved in this preparation. That detail carries enormous emotional significance because William understands better than almost anyone what it means to lose a normal childhood beneath the pressure of royal expectation. After Princess Diana's death, the young prince was thrust into a world where grief and duty collided publicly before millions. Royal historians frequently describe William's adolescence as one marked by emotional restraint, relentless scrutiny, and a constant awareness that his future had already been decided for him. Insiders now whisper that William is determined to prepare George differently, to give him guidance rather than distance, protection rather than cold protocol. Yet despite those intentions, some close to the palace reportedly fear history may still be repeating itself in quieter ways. Catherine's role within this transformation has allegedly become equally important. While palace advisors focus on constitutional preparation, reports suggest the Princess of Wales has remained intensely focused on protecting George's emotional stability. Sources claim she has worked carefully to preserve moments of normality within an increasingly controlled royal environment. Family routines, school life, and time away from official obligations are all believed to have become priorities for Catherine as pressure surrounding George quietly intensifies. Because behind every future king stands a child who never asked for the burden placed upon him. And according to insiders, Catherine understands the danger of allowing duty to consume that child too early. Yet despite her efforts, royal aides increasingly describe George as serious beyond his years. That phrase has reportedly surfaced repeatedly in conversations among staff who interact with the young prince during official engagements. Some interpret it as maturity. Others see something more troubling, a growing awareness inside George himself that his life is changing faster than anyone around him is willing to publicly admit. Comparisons to William's own upbringing after Diana's death have become impossible to ignore within royal circles. Because once again, the monarchy appears to be shaping a young heir during a period of uncertainty, pressure, and silent institutional fear. But while George's preparation remained hidden from public view, one royal figure reportedly pushed hardest for the dramatic new arrangements. King Charles himself, According to several royal commentators, this was not merely a bureaucratic adjustment, it was deeply personal. King Charles, weakened but increasingly focused on legacy, reportedly stepped in directly to approve George's new travel structure, and insiders whisper that the monarch's decision carried an unmistakable message to the entire royal institution. The future must be secured now, not later. For months, palace officials had allegedly debated how quickly Prince George should be introduced to the heavier constitutional realities surrounding his future role. Some believed the transition should remain gradual, carefully paced to preserve as much normality as possible during his childhood. Others reportedly argued that the monarchy no longer had the luxury of moving slowly. Behind closed doors, anxiety surrounding the institution's long-term stability had reportedly intensified alongside growing concerns over King Charles' health. And according to multiple royal commentators, it was Charles himself who ultimately forced the conversation forward. Sources familiar with palace operations claimed the king became increasingly impatient with delays surrounding George's evolving royal preparation. Different interpretations of internal discussions suggest Charles quietly bypassed slower administrative channels in order to personally approve the revised travel arrangements. That detail matters because Buckingham Palace traditionally operates through layers of consultation, protocol review, and institutional caution. Sudden decision onsets are rare. Direct intervention from the monarch is even rarer. Yet according to whispers circulating among royal aides, Charles no longer viewed the situation as something that could wait for perfect timing or endless internal consensus. Royal staff reportedly described a growing sense of urgency surrounding the approval. Meetings that once focused on future planning allegedly shifted toward immediate implementation. Advisors connected to royal security, constitutional affairs, and overseas coordination were said to be operating under unusually compressed timelines. Palace insiders claim the atmosphere behind the scenes became increasingly tense as the king pushed for faster movement. Because to Charles, according to one commentator, this was no longer simply about preparing George for someday. It was about ensuring the monarchy remained psychologically and institutionally prepared for whatever uncertainties might lie ahead. Reports suggest the king's health struggles profoundly reshaped his perspective on legacy. Since early 2024, Charles has publicly attempted to maintain continuity while privately confronting the physical limitations imposed by illness. But according to those miles close to palace circles, the experience reportedly deepened his awareness of how fragile royal transitions can become when preparation is delayed too long. That realization may explain why insiders now believe Charles has become increasingly determined to strengthen the monarchy's future foundation while he still retains the authority to do so. And at the center of that strategy stands Prince George. Royal historians have quietly drawn comparisons between Charles' recent actions and the long-term succession planning once associated with Queen Elizabeth II herself. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth was known for thinking decades ahead, carefully managing transitions not only through public appearances, but through subtle institutional positioning behind the scenes. Some commentators now believe Charles is attempting something remarkably similar, though under far more emotionally difficult circumstances. Unlike Elizabeth, who projected permanence for generations, Charles inherited a monarchy already facing uncertainty, public scrutiny, and shifting expectations. According to palace whispers, that pressure has intensified his focus on securing continuity through William and George fast, more than many anticipated. Prince William reportedly supported the overall direction of the changes, though insiders claim he initially hesitated over the timing. That hesitation was deeply personal. William understands the emotional cost of growing up too quickly beneath the shadow of royal duty. He understands what happens when childhood becomes secondary to constitutional necessity. Sources close to the Wales household suggest William's greatest fear has never been George's ability to handle responsibility, but rather the speed at which that responsibility may arrive. Yet despite those concerns, reports indicate William ultimately recognized the institutional realities driving his father's urgency. Within palace corridors, observers have reportedly begun referring to the entire situation as the quiet acceleration of the next reign. Not an official transition, not a formal transfer of power, but a subtle, carefully managed shift in focus toward the monarchy's future generations. George's appearances, preparation, and symbolic importance now seem to carry greater weight with every passing month. And according to insiders, That transformation is happening far faster than the public. I fully understands. Yet the deeper palace tension wasn't about logistics or schedules, it was about the growing realization that George's childhood may already be slipping away. Behind every royal protocol lies a family struggling to protect its children from the weight of the crown. And according to palace insiders, Princess Catherine's greatest fear has never been duty, it has been losing George to it too soon. As preparations intensified around the young prince, those close to Kensington Palace claim Catherine became increasingly protective behind the scenes. For years, William and Catherine worked carefully to create an environment for their children that felt as grounded and ordinary as possible, despite the extraordinary world surrounding them. School runs, family outings, sporting events, and carefully guarded routines reportedly became part of a deliberate strategy to shield George, Charlotte, and Louis from the crushing pressures that once defined previous royal childhoods. Palace insiders frequently described Catherine as the stabilizing force behind that effort, someone deeply aware that royal destiny can quietly consume a child long before adulthood ever arrives. But according to whispers now circulating within royal circles, that balance has become far more difficult to maintain as attention surrounding George intensifies with every passing month. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim Catherine has grown increasingly concerned about the emotional pressure building around her eldest son. The issue, insiders say, is not merely the public attention itself, but the growing awareness inside George that expectations surrounding him are changing. Reports suggest the young prince has become more conscious of the significance attached to his role, particularly following major royal events where his presence suddenly carried greater symbolic weight. And for Catherine, according to those familiar with her thinking, that realization represents a painful turning point. Because once a royal child fully understands the burden of the crown, there is no returning to innocence afterward. Different interpretations from palace insiders suggest Catherine has quietly fought to preserve as much normality as possible inside the Wales household. Family dinners reportedly remain protected from official interruptions. School life is said to be treated as sacred time. Source: I asked, even claim Catherine has become highly selective about George's public appearances, carefully weighing each event against the emotional cost it might place upon him. Those close to the princess allegedly describe her as fiercely protective when it comes to maintaining boundaries between royal obligation and childhood itself. Yet despite those efforts, the institution surrounding George appears to be moving faster than ever before. William, according to royal commentators, finds himself trapped between two powerful realities. On one side stands his role as heir to the throne, fully aware of the constitutional necessity driving his father's urgency. On the other stands his role as a father who personally experienced the emotional brutality of growing up beneath relentless public scrutiny. After Diana's death, William's grief unfolded under the gaze of the entire world. His adolescence became inseparable from royal expectation, and insiders now claim that memory continues to shape every decision he and Catherine make concerning George. They reportedly understand better than anyone how quickly royal duty can begin to replace ordinary childhood experiences. But the problem facing the Wales family extends beyond palace walls. Reports suggest the media attention surrounding George has reached levels that are becoming increasingly difficult to manage privately. Royal aides allegedly monitor an endless cycle of speculation surrounding the young prince's future, education, public role, and constitutional significance. Every appearance generates headlines. Every expression is analyzed. Every small change in behavior sparks commentary about whether George is being prepared for something larger behind the scenes. According to palace insiders, Catherine has become deeply uncomfortable with the growing intensity of that attention, fearing it risks placing emotional expectations upon George long before he is ready to carry them. That concern reportedly explains why Catherine has pushed for stricter boundaries surrounding George's exposure to royal operations. Sources claim she has privately advocated for limits on public engagements, controlled media access, and greater protection of the children's private routines. But insiders whisper that maintaining those boundaries is becoming increasingly difficult as institutional priorities shift toward long-term succession plans. Royal experts now openly compare George's situation to William's own upbringing during periods of immense public pressure after Diana's death. And for many within palace circles, that comparison carries an unsettling implication. History may once again be accelerating the transformation of a royal child before his family is emotionally prepared to let him go. But despite those concerns, the palace appears convinced that a larger constitutional shift is already underway, and Prince George stands directly at its center. What began as a quiet travel adjustment now appears to symbolize something far larger. Within palace corridors, reports suggest senior royals increasingly see Prince George not simply as a child heir, but as the stabilizing face of the monarchy's next era. And with King Charles determined to secure continuity during uncertain times, every movement surrounding George suddenly carries historic significance. According to palace insiders, conversations that once focused only on immediate royal duties have slowly expanded into something far more profound: the long-term survival of the institution itself. Behind the carefully controlled public image of calm continuity, reports suggest senior advisors are already thinking years ahead, quietly preparing for a future where Prince William eventually ascends the throne and George moves even closer to the center of royal life. That transition may still seem distant to the public, but within palace walls, whispers of generational planning have allegedly intensified with remarkable urgency. Because the monarchy has always operated on a timeline far longer than ordinary politics or public opinion. It plans decades ahead. And according to those familiar with internal discussions, George is now at the heart of those calculations. Royal observers claim the young prince has become increasingly central to the monarchy's broader public strategy, not through dramatic announcements or sudden changes, but through subtle positioning designed to strengthen public confidence in the royal future. Every carefully timed appearance, every ceremonial moment beside William and Catherine, every glimpse of George standing within the ancient machinery of monarchy now carries layered significance. Palace insiders suggest the institution understands something deeply important. Public faith in the crown often depends less on the present than on belief in the future. And George, perhaps without fully realizing it himself, has quietly become a symbol of that future. Some royal historians have even begun drawing comparisons between Prince George and the young Princess Elizabeth during the uncertainty of the Second World War. At that time, the future queen became a reassuring symbol of continuity for a nation facing fear, instability, and change. Different interpretations of the current royal strategy suggest palace officials may now be attempting something remarkably similar. Britain today faces a very different world, but the monarchy itself is once again navigating uncertainty surrounding health, succession, and public trust. According to commentators, George's growing visibility is not accidental. It is part of a carefully managed effort to reassure both the nation and the Commonwealth that stability remains intact across generations. Reports also suggest royal staff have quietly begun adapting long-term schedules and institutional planning around George's future role. Advisors allegedly view his preparation not as a distant concern, but as an active process already underway. Diplomatic events, ceremonial appearances, and international engagements are said to be increasingly evaluated through the lens of how they contribute to shaping George's eventual public identity. Palace insiders claim even seemingly ordinary decisions are now being measured against broader constitutional considerations, because within the monarchy, perception matters almost as much as power itself. The crown survives by projecting permanence, and permanence requires careful cultivation long before a crown is ever formally inherited. Public appearances involving George have reportedly become especially calculated in recent months. Royal commentators point to moments where the young prince appears deliberately positioned beside key senior royals during emotionally symbolic occasions. According to insiders, these appearances are designed not merely to introduce George to public life, but to slowly build emotional familiarity between the future king and the people watching him grow. The process is gradual, almost invisible at times, but highly intentional. Palace strategists allegedly understand that monarchy depends heavily on emotional continuity, the sense that one generation naturally carries the legacy of the last, and George now represents the next link in that fragile chain. Experts increasingly claim the monarchy is attempting to future-proof itself during a period of enormous uncertainty. King Charles' health struggles, combined with shifting public expectations and relentless global scrutiny, have reportedly convinced senior palace figures that the institution cannot afford complacency. Every decision now appears connected to a larger effort to secure long-term stability across generations. Yet within that strategy lies a quiet emotional cost rarely discussed publicly. Because while the institution prepares for the future, a young boy continues growing beneath the immense shadow of expectations he never chose for himself. Still, one unanswered question continues to haunt royal watchers everywhere. What exactly comes next for the young prince now that these arrangements are officially approved? The burden of monarchy rarely arrives all at once. It creeps quietly into childhood through guarded conversations, revised schedules, and expectations impossible to escape. For Prince George, insiders now believe that moment has arrived, and according to whispers inside royal circles, the East travel arrangements may only be the first step in a much larger transformation already unfolding behind palace walls. At the center of that transformation lies a reality few royal children can fully understand until it is already happening to them. One day, they are simply sons or daughters within a famous family. The next, they become living symbols of continuity, stability, and national expectation. Reports suggest Prince George is beginning to experience that shift now in ways both subtle and deeply psychological. Palace insiders claim conversations surrounding his future role have grown more serious in recent months, while advisors increasingly discuss him not as a distant future king, but as someone whose public presence already carries constitutional significance. And for a child still trying to navigate ordinary life, that realization can become an invisible weight impossible to set down. The expectations surrounding George reportedly continue growing with every public appearance. Royal commentators claim even the smallest moments involving the young prince now trigger intense scrutiny from both the British press and international media outlets. Analysts dissect his position, stance, expressions, confidence, and interactions with senior royals as though each gesture offers clues about the future of the monarchy itself. According to palace whispers, this constant attention has become increasingly difficult for Kensington Palace to shield him from completely, because in today's world, royal childhood no longer unfolds privately behind palace gates. It unfolds beneath relentless global observation, where every image becomes a headline and every appearance sparks speculation about what comes next. Different interpretations from palace insiders suggest George has already begun adapting to a far stricter form of royal discipline. Reports claim his schedule now includes more structured preparation tied to public duties, constitutional understanding, and ceremonial expectations. Even routine engagements are allegedly treated as opportunities for gradual exposure to the pressures of royal life. Sources familiar with palace operations describe a carefully managed process designed to build confidence while slowly increasing responsibility. But beneath that careful planning lies an uncomfortable truth the monarchy has faced for generations. Preparation for the crown often requires childhood sacrifices long before the title itself ever arrives. Prince William reportedly remains deeply determined to avoid the parenting mistakes that haunted previous generations of the royal family. According to commentators close to palace circles, William's own experiences growing up under overwhelming scrutiny continue shaping how he approaches George's upbringing. He remembers the emotional isolation, the pressure to appear composed during moments of grief, the suffocating sense that duty always came first. Insiders claim William has become increasingly protective of George's emotional world, trying to ensure his son feels supported rather than consumed by royal expectation. Yet the challenge facing him is brutal in its complexity, because no matter how modern William and Catherine attempt to make royal parenting feel, the institution itself still demands sacrifice from those born closest to the throne. Meanwhile, palace officials are reportedly managing George's future international appearances with extraordinary caution. Sources suggest long-term planning is already underway regarding which events the young prince may eventually attend abroad, how his vision, should increase over time, and how public perception can be carefully shaped without overwhelming him too quickly. According to insiders, these discussions are no longer hypothetical. They are becoming active preparations tied directly to the monarchy's future strategy. Every decision now appears calculated not simply for the present moment, but for the image of the future King Britain may someday depend upon emotionally during uncertain times. Yet perhaps the deepest concern within palace circles revolves around the impossible balance between education, privacy, and monarchy itself. George is still a schoolboy, still a child trying to build friendships, routines, and memories outside the machinery of royal duty. But with each passing month, that ordinary world appears increasingly difficult to preserve. Royal experts warn that the emotional pressure surrounding him could intensify dramatically as public expectations continue rising. And behind the carefully managed image of stability, many insiders quietly fear the same question. How much of George's childhood can truly survive once the institution fully begins preparing him for the crown? And as Britain watches the young Prince step closer toward destiny, the palace faces a difficult reality that can no longer be ignored. In the end, this was never just about travel. It was about continuity, legacy, survival. According to palace insiders, King Charles' approval marked far more than a procedural royal adjustment. It marked the quiet beginning of the monarchy's next chapter. And standing at the center of it all is a boy whose future may already be carrying the weight of the crown itself. For centuries, the British monarchy has survived because it understood one brutal truth better than any institution on earth. The crown cannot pause for uncertainty. Kings age, queens pass away, public opinion shifts like storms across history. But the institution survives only if the next generation is already prepared before crisis fully arrives. According to royal commentators, that understanding now defines nearly every decision being made behind palace walls. And for King Charles, whose reign has unfolded under the shadow of personal health struggles and growing public scrutiny, the urgency surrounding Prince George appears deeply connected to something larger than protocol alone. Reports suggest the king has become, intensely focused on securing the monarchy's long-term future while he still has the power and time to shape it himself. That focus, insiders claim, has quietly transformed the role Prince George now occupies within the royal family. He is no longer viewed simply as William and Catherine's eldest child or even merely as second in line to the throne. Increasingly, palace figures allegedly see him as a living symbol of stability and continuity during a period when the monarchy is navigating enormous emotional and institutional change. Royal historians point out that monarchies survive through symbols as much as through constitutional structures. The public must believe the future exists before it arrives. And according to whispers from within palace circles, George has already become part of that emotional reassurance strategy, whether he fully understands it or not. For William and Catherine, the situation reportedly carries a painful emotional contradiction. Sources close to Kensington Palace claim the couple continue fighting to preserve moments of ordinary life for George, even as the institution surrounding him moves steadily toward preparing him for extraordinary responsibility. Family routines, school life, and carefully guarded privacy reportedly remain sacred priorities inside their household. But insiders suggest both William and Catherine now understand that a larger transition is slowly unfolding around their son, one that cannot be completely stopped, delayed, or controlled forever. Because within royal life, destiny rarely arrives through one dramatic moment. It arrives gradually, quietly, through accumulated expectations that become impossible to escape. Meanwhile, public fascination surrounding George continues intensifying at extraordinary speed. Every appearance now fuels worldwide discussion about the monarchy's future. Royal experts analyze his confidence, demeanor, and relationship with senior royals as though they are witnessing the earliest formation of a future sovereign already taking shape before the world's eyes. According to palace insiders, officials remain acutely aware of this growing global attention and carefully manage every public moment involving the young prince. Not because George is expected to lead now, but because the institution understands the importance of emotional familiarity. The monarchy wants the public to slowly, grow comfortable seeing him not merely as a child, but as part of Britain's future continuity. And perhaps that is the most striking reality of all. According to several royal commentators, the palace no longer speaks internally about George's future as something distant. Increasingly, insiders whisper a phrase that captures the mood now surrounding the institution itself. The future has already begun. Those words reveal just how dramatically the monarchy's mindset may have shifted behind closed doors. The preparation is no longer theoretical. The positioning is no longer symbolic alone. Every adjustment, every appearance, every decision surrounding George now seems connected to a broader understanding that the royal family is entering a new generational chapter faster than anyone once expected. Yet beneath all the ceremony, strategy, and constitutional planning lies something deeply human. A child growing up under unimaginable expectation. parents trying to protect him while knowing they cannot fully shield him forever. A grandfather confronting legacy while quietly preparing the institution he spent his life waiting to inherit. And surrounding all of them is the ancient Machi, minority of monarchy itself, unyielding, relentless, and always moving forward no matter the emotional cost demanded from those born inside it. Because within the ancient walls of the monarchy, childhood fades quickly and history is already waiting for Prince George. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.